All right, welcome to Northwestern Voices. Today my guests are John Van Gelderen and Paul Murrell. And before we get started, what is that? Not your name?
It's okay. That's just not how it's pronounced.
Okay. Paul, would you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Paul Murrell.
Paul Murrell.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I thought it was Murrell.
It's spelled that
Probably
way.
get that all the time. All right. So obviously, us young guys here, we're sponsored by Red Bull for this particular podcast because all of us cool young guys, of course, we drink Red Bull, and so that's just what we do, right, guys?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, every day.
And we're gonna establish the bona fides, if you will, of Northwestern Voices for you guys, because some people might be looking at this and saying, well, who are these people? I've never seen them before. Are they even from Park Rapids? But what those people don't know is that everybody, or maybe hadn't thought about before, is that everybody, wherever they are always northwest of something, okay? And in the case of John Van Gelderen, he comes to us from Northwestern Florida in the Pensacola area, right? And Paul Murrell, like Pearl, like Paul.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Paul Murrell, is a resident of Moscow, Idaho, and which is in the northwestern portion of the United States. So you see, that's really the only qualification that is necessary to appear on this podcast, is that you have to have some justification or some relation to the concept of Northwest, which is a state of mind. North being sort of, cold and frigid, tough, is what I think about with you guys, cold, frigid, and tough. Mm-hmm. And then Western has to do with the idea of expansion, expanded minds, expanded ideas, and possibilities. So we're tough, we're cold, but we also have a very expansive, broad view of things. Okay. So what brings John and Paul together with us today is that these are very close friends of Caleb Hawn. They are... I'm gonna list the things that I know that you have in common. Okay, you're both friends of Caleb Hawn, which means that you probably both have some diagnosable condition on the DSM spectrum.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. You're both actors, right? You're both martial artists. You're both in your 20s. Early 20s. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you are both Christians, and you're both the sons of, I'll say clergy, but I think evangelists are considered to be clergy. So John Van Gelderen is the son of an evangelist, and Paul Murrell is the son of a bishop in the Anglican Church. Is that what is the denomination?
It's the UECNA, so United Episcopal Church in North America, but it is an Anglican denomination. Okay, all right. So let's start with John, because your first name comes first alphabetically. So Pensacola, Florida. What are you doing there? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
So currently I'm going to Pensacola Christian College in Florida. I'm going as a pastoral ministries major because I feel like God wants me to go into some aspect of the ministry. I'm not going specifically to be a pastor, but I chose pastoral because I felt like it was the best biblical major that they had there.
Okay.
And after I'm done with that, I'm going into my senior year this fall. I hope to get my master's in biblical counseling.
Counseling, okay. So that's a post graduation. Obviously, you say it's a master's. So, and how many years will it take for you to get that?
I believe 2.
2. All right, and then you'll go out into the world and do something with those degrees.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the Pensacola Christian College. Like when, well, obviously it's in Pensacola, but how many students are there? Is it all male, co-ed, or what? Just give us a few details about the college itself.
Yes. So this coming semester, Pensacola is actually going to have, I think, the most amount of students that it's ever had. I'm not for sure if that's correct, but I think we're going to have around 6,000 students, both men and women. Yeah, and it's a Christian college. It's technically non-denominational, but it would lean more into the Baptist side of things.
Okay.
There.
And is it Southern Baptist, or are we talking about more like independent? Like, in other words, is it a do they use the King James version there?
Yes.
Okay. So actually, I don't know enough about Southern Baptist to know whether or not they do that too. But so would it be more along the lines of an independent fundamental Baptist?
I would say so, yeah.
Flavor to it? Okay. And why did you choose that as a college to go to?
So the year before, I took a gap year after I graduated. And I really didn't know where I wanted to go to college. And I prayed about it a lot. And there were certain things in my life that started pushing me towards Pensacola. And I felt that I needed to be in some aspect of the ministry. And I'd already been interested in Pensacola as, I think, around the age of like 13 or 14. And yeah, God just started opening up the doors to go there. And I took a gap year, and I decided in the middle of that gap year that I wanted to go to Pensacola and major in pastoral ministries.
Well, now, where do you hail from?
Michigan.
Michigan. Okay. That's basically where you grew up and did all your elementary and secondary schooling and all that stuff?
Yes. I still go back there for winter break and summer break.
Okay. And your father's an evangelist, right? And his name is also John Van Gelderen, right? So what was it like kind of growing up? So for those people who don't know, like what is the job description of an evangelist, somebody who in a Baptist evangelist, I should say.
Yes.
Yeah.
So an evangelist goes to a new church each week. Usually they're invited there, and they evangelize. They preach the word. Generally, it's more gospel oriented or revival oriented.
Yeah. And
yeah, it's just every week. So growing up like that, I had to be homeschooled because I wasn't able to, if we're going to a new church every week, wasn't really able to be in a school. And yeah, it's very cool. I've seen a lot around the country and even in some other countries as well.
So you go to a different place every week, pretty much. I mean, I'm sure they take a week or two off in there somewhere, right? So what is that? So what's that experience like? I mean, just kind of going from place to place, and how do you feel as though that helped in your development?
I think I was able to meet a lot of new friends. I met Caleb.
Yep.
Through my dad being an evangelist. It has been interesting to see the state of a lot of different churches and learn from the success and the mistakes at each of those churches. Yeah. And, sometimes, especially, my dad preaching about revival, we've seen revival happen at churches before, and God's really worked, and it's been really cool to see that growing up.
Are there any traits or characteristics about churches that are successful that you've noticed through that? I mean, because you must have been in hundreds and hundreds of churches, because growing up, I mean, all the way through, the time that you're going to Pensacola, if you're going to 50 different churches per year, I mean, you multiply that out, and I mean, it sounds like it could even be in the thousands of churches that you've been to. Generally speaking, without, making any particular references, like what do you see about the churches that are successful?
Churches that are successful, they try to focus more on the spirit-filled walk with God instead of just the letter of the law and just a list of do's and don'ts. Instead, it's getting a personal relationship with God.
Yeah.
And churches that are more focused on that generally tend to do a lot better than churches that do not.
Do you have any interest in becoming an evangelist yourself?
Possibly. I do, as far as biblical counseling is concerned. This past semester, I really felt called to the area of biblical counseling, And I think that's, as far as where I am, or I'll be in the ministry, I think that's where God wants me to be as of right now.
You know, the statistics are kind of skewing at this point in time, if you want to look at it as a pendulum, where they're saying there are more and more people who are, or fewer and fewer people out there who are identifying as Christian. And of those who are identifying as Christian, a lot of them are not attending church and, kind of, just saying that that's not necessary. Do you find that the fact that there are fewer people who are identifying as Christian actually broadens the field in terms of the mission field, thus making the job of the evangelist easier? Or do you feel as though these attitudes that are forming as a result of the culture and the way things are going in terms of education and everything like that is actually making the job of the missionary much more difficult? Or do you think there's really no difference?
I would say...
not missionary, evangelist.
Yeah. I would say there's both positives and negatives. I mean, the field is definitely larger, but I would also say that some areas of that field that are now larger are also harder to reach. Mm-hmm. Especially considering the area that you go to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say you have both positives and negatives on both sides.
Do you find that there are particular areas of the country that you go to where you're thinking to yourself, well, we're going to have a much more receptive audience than others?
Yes.
So what areas would you say would be the ones that you're going to have a better, not a better, but a more, let's just use that phrase, receptive audience?
I would say this wouldn't apply across the board, but personally I found more down south in like the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
People are a lot more receptive, especially than up north. I think people up north aren't as receptive. Like we would go to places like New York, and
yeah,
it's definitely a little bit harder to get through.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's part of the attitude of people down south versus the attitude of people up north. I think a lot of people down south are, I would say, just more welcoming. I'm not saying that applies to every single person down south and every single person up north.
Right.
But I would say in general, people down south are a lot more receptive.
So if they're more welcoming, that makes them more receptive to the gospel message as well, you think?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have you ever had any, I'm sure over the course of over the years that you've probably got some interesting stories of, particular things that have happened, but have you ever had any real, like pushback from people when have you ever experienced like somebody getting up in the middle of one of the services and saying, "Oh, I disagree with that," or, that kind of thing? Or
we've never, from what I remember, I don't think we've ever had anybody get up in the middle of a service, but my dad has had a ton of people come up to him afterwards and be not very kind in the way that they ask him questions and things like that.
Did you learn? So you must learn something from watching that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the skills that you'd have, these are all people skills, of course, but having to deal with kind of like negative feedback and all that stuff, I'm sure that probably some of that rubbed off on you as well, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to Paul. Paul, you are attending it's a Christian college.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what's the name of the college?
New St. Andrews in Moscow, Idaho.
New St. Andrews.
Just leave the Idaho part off. It sounds more impressive.
So, what's Old St. Andrews?
Old St. Andrews would just be St. Andrews in Scotland. Yep.
Okay. So this is a university that is a satellite of the original, or why is it called New St. Andrews?
Right. So I'm not 100% certain why they chose St. Andrews, but my guess is, being a student there, that it's because we are a classical liberal arts college, but we are specifically a classical liberal arts college downstream of the tradition that was common in Scotland and was most obvious in St. Andrews, like 150 years ago.
Okay.
And St. Andrews since then has let's say, departed from the idea of classical education.
Okay.
With the decline of the church in Scotland and
Right.
the UK in general.
Right. So what was the tradition of the original St. Andrews?
So pretty much with classical liberal arts, it will be very similar, regardless of where it's coming from. You'll just see different emphases.
Mm-hmm.
So every first year has to study Latin, which used to be standard across all liberal arts, but isn't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Scotland specifically they had a very strong Presbyterian influence, right? After Queen Anne especially.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very much a Presbyterian college. It says it's a Reformed college, but really it's a Presbyterian college. And it's specifically Scottish-style Presbyterian. And so that's the biggest thing is how present Christianity is in the education is very rigorous. And I would say, obviously Cambridge and Oxford used to be Christians colleges, but they've departed from that. And so yeah, I think it's the emphasis on faith in education.
What's the enrollment there?
Like student to faculty?
No, I mean like the total student enrollment.
Ooh, there's about, I would guess 400-ish. Full-time students probably 350.
Oh, so it's very small.
They're intentionally not expanding super fast because you just can't as easily keep up the quality of instruction.
Is it selective in terms of admissions?
It's fairly selective. It's getting more selective as more people apply.
Mm-hmm.
The word of New St. Andrews, Doug Wilson, get out. But it's, I would say of colleges with that quality of education, it's fairly generous. And what they'll typically do is if you almost meet the requirements or they think that you might be a good addition, they'll let you come for a year, a non-matriculating student. And then if you've shown that, you're someone that they want to keep around, they'll say, do you want to become a full-time student? So it's pretty selective, but
it's sort of like a motorcycle gang. You got to hang around first, and then you get patched in.
Yeah, exactly. You have to show that you are academically
you got to do some dirt,
gang.
and then okay. Where do the students come from?
Oh, all over. We have students from China. We have students. Those are mostly graduate students. We have students from South Korea. We have students from England, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Which, and then we also have, obviously, a lot of American students. We have a student from somewhere in Africa, I believe. So yeah, it's you meet a shockingly large amount of diverse people.
And this Moscow, Idaho, became infamous because of that horrible killing that occurred there with Brian Koberger, I think is his name, is the guy he's presumed innocent, of course, but all signs seem to suggest that he was probably the killer.
It's a good guess.
What was it? So you were living in Moscow during that time. So what was it like? I mean, was there like were people afraid to go out at night, or what was the general feeling there during that time?
I think so. We're obviously in a town with a large university, state university, which is one of those students is the one that killed other fellow students. Amongst the U of
Idaho State?
Yeah, University of Idaho.
Oh, University, okay.
Yeah, and then 15 miles away, there's the University of Washington.
Washington
State University, yeah.
The Cougars.
Yep, no. So we have a lot of, non-Christian students. They were very, very scared. Like, that was the general mood. You saw less partying. I live on a street. There's a lot of U of I students there, and typically you hear a party every other night.
Yeah.
Them drinking, generally being rowdy. Gone for at least a month after that. Whereas with NSA, Dr. Merkel got up and he addressed us as a school. We meet together at least once a week. Yeah. And he basically said, this was an exception, right? This isn't something to panic over.
Yeah.
But, this is a good reminder to always be wise and don't go out alone at night, regardless of gender, but especially for the fair sex. You should be with other people at night. Yeah. So it was really just an opportunity to remind people of that bit of wisdom.
Do you think that in general Christians have less fear than non-Christians?
I think people that are secure in their faith fear things less. Yeah.
And why is that?
I think you have assurance of your eternal salvation. You have assurance that it doesn't matter what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. You are in the hands of the Lord, and what better guy to have in your corner, right?
Yeah. So there's only so much that you can control.
Right. You focus on the things that you can control, mm-hmm. while also acknowledging that all of it is under the eternal sovereignty of Christ.
Right. So Christians, you're saying, are less likely to do the hand wringing and stuff like that.
I think so. I think you see pretty regularly. Now, mm-hmm. maybe we're too afraid of showing our emotions sometimes. Because it's okay to be afraid, but you should still recognize.
I'm not sure if I agree with that statement, Caleb. Is it okay to be afraid? No, he says no.
In approximate sense, not an ultimate sense.
Okay.
Use my systematic language to weasel away.
No. No fear is our motto.
Yeah. It's better not to be afraid, and it's easy to be not. It's easy not to be afraid if you're secure.
Okay.
In your faith.
So John was talking about his father being an evangelist, mm-hmm. moving around all the time to different churches, visiting different churches. Your experience is basically like the polar opposite of that, right? I mean, in the sense, well, I shouldn't say that. I'll ask you about it, but your father was not a person who was traveling as much, right?
So I don't think not anywhere near as much as every other week or every week.
Yeah.
But I think the longest point we stayed in one place was South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I think, 7 years. That's the longest time we've ever been in one place.
Okay. Where were you born?
I was born in Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, I was born in Virginia. Then we moved to the Caribbean. And then Papa went to medical school there. Yeah. And then we moved back to the States, and we've moved around a whole lot. So I was actually living here when I met Caleb.
Yeah.
So technically I'm sort of Midwest.
Living
in Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
Not Park Rapids, but in Minnesota, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've moved around a lot, and a lot of the time we've moved to places where there wasn't a whole lot of local church.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when my parents moved to Montana.
Yeah.
It's an Native American reservation.
Oh yeah.
No really gospel preaching church. So
okay, and so he would minister to the people when. So what did that look like?
Well, so he's a doctor as well, a medical doctor, and so it's a lot of people are very sad in hospitals.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when loved ones are dying, and that's pretty common in those places.
Yeah.
And so it's a good opportunity. You say, do you mind if I pray with you?
Right.
Right. That kind of thing. And then also we would have church, which we would have a schedule, and we have a Facebook page actually. That church keeps moving. It's St. Urith's Chapel.
What's it called?
St. Urith's.
How do you spell that?
Urith.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a lesser known Welsh saint.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay. A saint.
Yeah. It is. She was a saint. I mean, a faithful woman that. Yeah.
Okay. And that this is also Presbyterian, right? You're talking about, or no? I'm sorry. Oh, so it was Episcopal. It was Episcopalian,
so
right? Yeah.
I am not Presbyterian, but I go to a Presbyterian school.
Aren't Anglican and Presbyterian similar in some senses?
Very similar. Sorry for bumping the mic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're very similar. I would say there's just a few different emphases. So Anglicans, obviously, we have preserved the episcopacy. Mm-hmm. We just don't believe in a pope.
Okay. So what is an episcopacy?
So that's bishops. So it's a tri-tiered clergy. So you have bishops, you have regular priests, and then you have deacons. Mm-hmm. Deacon doesn't necessarily need to become a priest.
Yeah.
Though that's common practice.
Deacon, I think that was from Acts, I think, right? Was it creation of the deacons?
Right, Acts, St. Stephen?
I believe so.
They were serving tables and...
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're responsible for assisting the clergy with more, I guess, worldly affairs, but yeah.
And the bishops came from, what is it? Was it...
Titus.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, so in the book of Titus, you have the listing of the responsibilities of elders. Yeah. And then you also have kind of the archetype throughout all Scripture.
And that implies a hierarchical structure to that particular denomination.
hierarchy in matters of responsibility, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much I'm your boss because I'm a bishop.
Yeah.
It's more they're shepherds and keepers of scriptural truth.
And there's no supreme head of the church.
No, there is. So there's a chief amongst equals, so like an archbishop or a presiding bishop, but he's elected by the House of Bishops.
And where does he sit?
Where does he sit?
Mm-hmm.
Ours is the priest, I guess rector at a church in Waynesboro, Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's not like with the British church where you have
he doesn't have a seat, right?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I mean I think technically his church would be the diocesan seat, but I mean that would change depending on who's the presiding bishop.
Okay. And do you have a church that you attend when you're out there in Idaho?
Not an Anglican church, unfortunately. There is one in town, but I have my problems with those.
Okay.
It's not UECNA. I attend a CREC, so that's the denomination affiliated with Doug Wilson.
Okay.
It's called Trinity Reformed Church, which is, I think, a very good church. It's a very large church, and funnily enough, it's the more liturgical church in town.
Oh.
But it's also the most friendly, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and John, do you attend a church down in Pensacola too?
They have one on campus.
They do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's it's like a campus congregation.
Yeah, it's just called Campus Church.
Campus Church. Okay. All right, so now let's move from education and church and things like that, and let's get right into the subject of fighting. Okay. Paul, you're both martial artists. So, but I'll start with you, Paul, on this. So you've actually had, I want to call them, are they amateur? They're
amateur.
There's amateur cage fights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why?
First things first.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call them cage fights.
Okay.
I would hesitate to call them fights because it's under a rule set.
Yeah.
It's you're protected.
Yeah.
And it's maybe a dangerous activity. It's really not that dangerous amateur wise. But it's a matter of testing oneself.
Okay.
So man is made to struggle, and that's a good thing.
Right.
And there is you will never know the ends of or the extent of how much you can struggle without breaking until you have a guy that's trying to take your head off and make your day be uncomfortable. So it's kind of a similar idea to jousting, right? Some people are naturally very aggressive, especially in our imperfect nature.
All right.
And I agree with C.S. Lewis when he says that it is necessary to have an outlet that is not destructive for that thing. And that's an outlet that it's not destructive. You're not going to kill anyone, almost certainly.
But some people jog or, garden, and, aren't those outlets as well?
No, those are not. I don't know, John. You've done martial arts your whole life. Maybe you're not as aggressive as me, but there's nothing like testing the extent of what you have learned in as close as you can get to an actual situation.
What styles of martial arts did you study?
So I would say primarily karate, but that's a very vague thing. I have a black belt in karate and Tae Kwon Do. Mm-hmm. But I've done a lot of boxing. I've done a little bit of judo, some jiu-jitsu.
You've done some like Marquis of Queensberry rules boxing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, that and karate are probably the things that I've done the most. I'm lumping Tae Kwon Do and karate together there.
So you classify yourself as a striker rather than a ground fighter?
Definitely more of a striker, yeah. I would consider myself a mixed martial artist because I actually started in fencing, Olympic-style fencing, and historical European martial arts, which is swords. But yeah.
So you train, you spar, things like that, and then you have a fight, right? But you don't get paid. You didn't get paid for the fight.
Right.
Okay, that's the only difference between amateur and professional.
Yeah,
right?
That and drug testing.
Oh, okay. So you guys can take whatever you want without fear.
Though some regional promotions, really should be drug testing, but there are some regional promotions that don't drug test their professional athletes, especially Minnesota.
Okay. So so you get into the ring with this opponent, and are there weight classes?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you have to match up. And what are you fighting at, a heavyweight or? No.
I'm a 170er.
Okay.
Typically.
Yeah.
Also,
it goes by the actual pound.
Yeah. So there are pound ranges. Right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So it's I think 172 technically through 185.
Oh.
And then and then underneath 170, it's
over 185 is just unlimited heavyweight.
No, no, that's middleweight, and then you have light heavyweight, which is up to 205.
Okay.
And then you have heavyweight, which is everything above that.
Everything above that. So 205 is the cutoff.
Yeah. Well, up to 265 actually.
And what do you if you're above 265?
You're not fighting in the UFC. Maybe in a regional promotion, they have super heavyweights, but the UFC has no super heavyweight. That's kind of
okay. Well, like there was like Butterbean. I don't know if you remember him.
Oh yeah, that was back in the Wild West day. When I say "well," I mean metaphorically, not literally.
Yeah. So, what's it like? The first time you're in a fight like that, and your opponent actually lands a good shot. What's going through your mind at that time?
Honestly, the first time I got hit in an MMA fight.
Yeah.
Was after getting ragdolled 3 times, like body lock thrown.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of like, I expected this to hurt more.
Yeah.
Right? Because, we always think, oh, there's nothing worse than getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
That's kind of how we view it. So, yeah, I think the biggest thing is this isn't actually as scary as I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of the main reason I fought, is I wanted to know how terrified I would be.
Yeah.
And I didn't think it was that scary. And that's kind of shocking.
Yeah.
Or at least it shocked me.
Yeah. Are you wearing gloves?
Yes, small. I think they're technically... They vary in weight, but I think they're technically 8 ounce.
And it's the fight can end by a knockout or by a decision?
Knockout, decision, submission.
Submission, right. Okay.
Technical knockout would be like you're not actually unconscious.
Too much.
But yeah, you can't continue. So in my debut, it was a TKO. Really, I was unconscious from a choke, but I somehow I woke back up and I stood up and I'm like,
like the birdies were flying.
Yeah. I threw a kick and I just kind of fell over.
Okay,
so all right, that was interesting.
Well, you've done something that 99.9% of the population out there hasn't done, which is go in there and agree to fight somebody. I mean that's commendable. Like what wisdom can you impart other than what you've stated about your experience in being in these fights?
I think I view social situations a bit different, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of people kind of ignore the fact that there is a consequence potentially of violence with fallen man. Yeah. And we have lived in a very privileged society where that's not something we have to worry about. Right. But I think as time goes on and, society, maybe this is too political, but as culture continues to decline, you're going to see more obvious signs of violence. Oh. And I think recognizing that, technically speaking, any interaction in public with someone that isn't Christian is a potentially violent situation is a good way to approach certain places in this world. Yeah.
Vigilance.
Yeah, vigilance. Exactly, yeah.
John, you're also a black belt in Tae Kwon Do. So tell me a little bit about your background there and where you studied and who you studied with and stuff like that.
Yes, so I am a third degree black belt in Tae Kwon Do currently, and I studied originally at a school in Tecumseh, Michigan, originally at the time he was Chief Master Sandoval. Then I switched to a different school that was about like an hour away from me and studied under Master John Fayette. And yeah, I do more, so Paul does a lot more of the fighting. I'm in an association called ATA. It's called the American Taekwondo Association. Okay. It's the largest Taekwondo association in the world, I believe. And I do...
Is it bigger than WTF?
Taekwondo.
It's bigger than World Taekwondo Federation? I didn't know that.
It was at some point. I don't know if it still is.
Do you know Nick Bretz at all from around here?
I do.
Is he in your association?
Or? No, he's not.
Okay.
So I compete in a more performance sort of competition. I do what's called extreme martial arts. I don't know if you're familiar with like a form or a
kata. Like kata form, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what you do is in extreme martial arts is you create your own, and generally you do it with music or just without music.
Yeah.
And you perform it in front of some judges. In extreme martial arts, you can do flips, you can release your weapon, you can do all sorts of stuff. A lot of people that do extreme martial arts become stunt doubles in a lot of movies. They go into that realm. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's my thing.
How have you benefited from studying this?
It has really helped me come out of myself a lot. Back when I first started, I've always been a super shy person, but I was really, really shy back when I started.
Yeah.
And it has really helped me come out of myself. I mean, going in front of a bunch of people, doing all this stuff, it forces you to come out of yourself.
Sure.
And
it's kind of like pushing you off the dock, sink or swim.
And it does become super addictive. I mean, that adrenaline rush that you get when you hit a trick in front of everyone, the crowd goes crazy. It's really nice. It's a lot of fun.
You were both homeschooled? You guys? Mm-hmm. Okay. So one thing I think that people have some I don't want to call it a criticism or something that people always point out about homeschooling is they say, well, how will the child ever become socialized, right? And having known you guys for I'd say a couple of years now at least, you both seem pretty normal to me.
Well, now I'm insulted.
But then again, I don't know. But then I'm kind of prejudiced, because then I know you're friends with Caleb.
Yeah.
So then how normal could they really be? But
there's that whole detail.
So is it true that homeschool kids have less social skills or are less able to cope with the outside world in some way? Do you think? John, you nodded your head, so let's start with John. Yeah.
Not every homeschool kid, and I would say the reason why I was able to break out of being a typical homeschooler was martial arts.
Okay.
I would 100% say it was martial arts. Yeah. There were other factors, but martial arts really pushed me out of my comfort zone.
Okay.
From just being in a Baptist church every week.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a nice place to be, but at the same time, does it prepare you for what's out there, really? I guess that's the question, right? Yeah.
I would say it really has helped prepare me for what's out there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. It definitely, martial arts really helped me come out of myself and forced me to interact with people more normally.
Yeah. Well, you go to the Christian college now, but because of your martial arts training and other experiences that you've had, do you find yourself having any problems interacting with the people at the bank or restaurants or just people out there in the world, right? Do you feel like you're lacking in any social skills or anything like that as a result of not having gone to a traditional school?
I would say, if you had asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have said yes. Uh-huh. Now I would say no.
So you caught up completely at this point, right?
Yeah.
I think there's actually a study that they did in Finland, which is you can have no social interaction until about 16 outside of your parents, and then you will generally catch up to as you're around people, 16 to 18. Yeah. Now, whether that has any merit, who knows?
Yeah.
But
did you have a similar experience, or what was your
Yeah, I my first I don't know. I've never struggled interacting with people. Mm-hmm. My father is very sociable. He has a strong Southern accent and he talks to anyone and everyone. So I think I had that example of just being willing to go out even if I don't feel like it and just talking to people and saying, hey, who are you? But I think with homeschooling, it just depends on how you're doing it.
Right.
If you have a very sheltered policy until the age of 12, I think that's fine. Mm-hmm. But after that, you definitely should have them. I think if you have them in something like theater, community theater is a really good thing, or martial arts, like you're saying.
Or sports or something.
Yeah, a team sport, something like that. Because I think the biggest failure that is common in homeschooling is the ability to work in a team.
It's interesting.
Because you just haven't really done it. So something that's a team sport or even martial arts, even though it's not technically a team sport, there's a team spirit.
Yeah.
Right? Especially if you have a competition team. So yeah, I think so long as you have those outlets, you're probably going to be, I guess, normal. You might be abnormal in some good ways, though.
In good ways, right? Yeah. So I mean, because there's obviously we just talked about that one thing as being like a quote unquote con, but there are lots of pros to it too. So like, would you, if you were to have a child today, not saying you would, but
my father would shoot me.
Yeah, maybe. Well, let's see. It's Thursday. You get married tomorrow and have a child in 9 months.
Fair enough.
Would you homeschool?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I would lean towards that. I could be convinced to send my child to one of the classical schools in Idaho. Okay. There are a few where I live, but I would still lean towards homeschooling.
Okay. What about you, John?
I would lean towards maybe homeschooling for the first third of maybe their school years, and then maybe put them in a Christian school, but not just like any Christian school. Obviously, one that I feel comfortable with.
Sure. Yeah.
That's what I would lean more towards. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Languages. You said you studied a little bit of Latin, but did you ever learn any other, non-dead languages?
I only know dead language. Well, I know English, and that's technically a living language. Right. I know two different types of English. I'm studying. I've studied Middle English as well, and I'm taking Old English this coming year.
Chaucer and such.
Yeah, that's Middle English. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Beowulf was Old English.
Old English, yeah. Yeah, I'm going to read that in the original thing. I'm really looking forward to it.
Okay.
But no, other than that, Latin. I did a little bit of Spanish in high school, but high school Spanish, not really very useful. I just dead languages mostly.
John, did you ever learn any languages when you were in school?
I learned Spanish.
A common trend.
Oh, you learned Spanish. Okay.
So, ¿por qué?
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I know this is a dead language, but I did
biblical Greek, right?
Koine Greek and Hebrew.
The Koine Greek.
Okay.
I mean, I can't speak it, but I can read it.
But you can read it, and that was part of your education at Pensacola, then?
Yes.
Okay.
I will say, the way that NSA teaches Latin, you have to learn how to speak it, not just read it.
Is that right?
Yes. Greek, too, actually.
Well, if you have a solid foundation in Latin, you should be able to pick up French and Spanish and Italian pretty easily, right?
I can read some of those with some help from a dictionary, and normally I can pick out what people are saying if they're speaking Mexican Spanish, because I had a grandfather that was Mexican, but adopted grandfather.
Okay. I was gonna say
I know, shocking, right?
Yeah. There's a guy who's got a YouTube channel, like he speaks Latin. He just goes to Italy and starts speaking Latin to people, and they get kind of what he's saying, but it's kind of interesting.
You should watch his video when he goes to Romania. They just straight up talk back to him, because Romanian is very similar to classical Latin.
Is that right? Yeah, that's Romanian is sort of it's like the forgotten Romance language, because everybody forgets. I mean, everybody always thinks of French and Spanish and Italian, but everybody always forgets about Romanian.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Some Romanians are really diehard on the whole, we are the true Rome, and Italy's not.
Yeah. I was actually just having this conversation about like the different alphabets and stuff like that, because like Russian and I guess Bulgarian, they use the Cyrillic alphabet, which is I think based more on the Greek alphabet. And my hypothesis, and this is probably 100% verifiable or not, but is that the countries that were under the influence of the Roman Catholic Church all ended up with the same alphabet that we have now. So you'd have Romania, and Poland even has the same alphabet as our country, even though our language, even though Polish is phonetically similar to Slavic language in Russia, and so they broke down. So the Cyrillic alphabet would be spoken in countries that are traditionally associated with Eastern Orthodox, and the other side would be the Roman Catholic Church. Do you agree with that or disagree?
Oh yeah, I think that's pretty easy to verify, especially English didn't used to have a Latin alphabet. Obviously we do now, and it's still English. So
Okay, let's go into. We talked about John's future plans a little bit. He's kind of undecided. He's going to get a master's. He's going to do some biblical counseling and potentially get into pastoral ministry of some kind, maybe an evangelist. It sounds like he's still kind of trying to figure it out. What about you, Paul?
Well, my goal at the moment is to go to law school after an essay.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You want to be a lawyer?
Well,
I should have known that before. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Whatever for.
Well, I think, we have a lot of really bad people that go to law school, frankly. You know, yourself included.
I'm following you so far, yeah.
Right. So I think...
So premise 1, we have a lot of bad people who go to law school. Okay, what's premise 2?
I think people that believe, faithful people that believe in a Christian form of government should go back into the institutions that we surrendered.
Yeah. I was going to say because we're completely outnumbered.
Oh, we're getting slaughtered. Captured on every front.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing, and
it's commendable. Yeah.
I really like political philosophy personally.
Okay.
I really like talking, if you hadn't noticed, and that seems to fit. I also have.
Did you ever study postmodern philosophy?
That's not philosophy.
Okay. Yeah.
I believe we're going to be doing a lot of that at essay this year.
Uh-huh.
But
okay.
Yeah, and then there's also some doors have opened up that kind of seem to point that direction. So.
What would you want to do, like as far as a practice is concerned?
In an ideal world, I want to do appellate con law, but
okay,
that's a very narrow.
You're talking about
field.
You want to do, so the first division is you want to do criminal or you want to do criminal cases.
I those that's the romantic thing is criminal law. But
do you have a stomach for it?
I think so. I guess you won't. I don't know.
Do
you really know that?
I've been a prosecutor and a defense attorney, actually, one of the professors at Temple when I went to law school said that most of you people, this is Anthony Bocchino, so most of you people won't even practice criminal law because most of you don't even have the stomach for it. Because there's a lot of unpleasantness in it, and I thought it meant that maybe you'd have to look at a picture of a dead person or something like that, which is true, but I think what he meant more was just like there's a lot of stress involved in it on either side, because, and it's like, half the time people are like, what do I even get? I don't get paid enough to do this, but like, you got a lot of pressure on you to get a conviction if you're the prosecutor. There's no more. It's. I don't do as much criminal defense now since I moved out here, but back in New York and stuff, we used to do a lot more felony cases and stuff. And if a person's actually innocent and they're being put on trial, it's a lot of pressure on you because the guy's like, get me out of this. I don't want to have to go to jail for years and years, and so there's a lot of that, and just like the human drama of it all. And you also have to be very facile with the rules of evidence. It requires a lot of thinking on your feet.
Right.
So a lot of attorneys, they do well on paper, which is good, right? Because those are the ones that usually make the most amount of money.
Right.
But the ones that are in the courtroom, the trial lawyers, you have to be responsive. You have to make objections. You have to come up with stuff. Think on your feet. Things like that. You get into appellate work. Actually, I got through when I first joined the Manhattan DA's office. Was my first job out of law school, which is the same office that has just prosecuted Donald Trump, which is a completely different office now. Than
I thought
it was
we weren't going to talk about.
We weren't going to talk. I'm just.
What happened to that?
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that. But anyway, it was that office, and I got assigned to the appellate or the appeals bureau, and I did criminal appeals as my first job right out of law school, but only at the state level. The big time appellate litigation, federal appellate litigation. If you really wanted to go down that track, what I would recommend doing is, first of all, start studying for your LSATs now. Get into like the best law school that you possibly can, incur a ton of debt, and go clerk for a federal district court judge somewhere.
Incur a ton of debt. Great advice.
Yeah, and then go clerk for a federal district court judge in some big city, like preferably like New York or Washington. Then get basically placed in a job as an assistant United States attorney and become a federal prosecutor, and then do really well and be diligent and beat everybody else. Then go out and join a major law firm somewhere for about 5 to 10 years. Make a lot of money financially so that you don't have to worry as much about that end of it, even though you make pretty good money as a federal prosecutor. Then go back to an assistant, or go back to being an AUSA somewhere, an assistant United States attorney, but condition you going back to that office on the idea that you only want to work on appeals. Okay, so you build the leverage in your years in the public or in the private sector.
Build your worth as an attorney.
I'm going to do. I'll come to your office in Dallas only if you let me handle Fifth Circuit appeals, and that's it. Okay, then you'll probably be able to do it. But there's a lot,
right? Yeah.
So you really gotta. The first thing you gotta do is get like all A's in college, and then just like nail that LSAT. Like start studying now. Then you got to go to some law school where they're going to try to give you all these crazy ideas, and they're not going to teach you how to do cases or anything like that, but you just got to bear with it, get that pedigree, and then take that pedigree and go places with it. The pedigree is just basically a door opener. All right. So the question that everybody was wanting to know, since you're both martial artists, what would happen if you fought each other?
I would say Paul definitely has more hand-to-hand experience than I do.
Okay.
I have more experience as far as probably like performing.
Oh, 100. Yeah. I don't think I've never competed in a forms division in my life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, not once.
Okay.
Like I could do Saison well, but that's a traditional form. There's no flips in that. It's all.
Well, I mean, and honestly, you're not going to fight each other for lots of different reasons. But the best way to win a fight is to prevent the fight from happening in the first place.
100%. So we've actually already both won dominantly.
Yeah, you're winning. We are all winning. We are actively winning. Right? We're in a state of winning.
And this kind of goes back to the vigilance points. You just always have to be winning that part of the fight, and society is safe.
I'm winning because I'm not fighting somebody right now.
Yeah, that's a win right there.
Okay.
It's a big win.
There's not much glory to it, though. This kind of
maybe
winning.
There's a lot of glory.
Yeah.
It's just not glory you'll experience in this life.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Few questions here I want to ask. Get both your thoughts on it. So, it was once said by you're both actors, right? It was once said by a famous acting instructor named Sanford Rubenstein that the foundation of acting is the reality of doing. Discuss.
Much like all of these great sayings, that is beautifully vague. But sure.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, Paul, you are a good actor. All joking aside, I mean, you've had lesser roles in Caleb's films. Like Paul, I think you've been. Well, actually, no, you've both been
about
kind
the
of
same.
about the same. Yeah. And you guys both kind of always play sort of like the bad guy or the tough guy or something like that in these. But I mean, so well, I don't know, maybe.
Well,
is that a fair and unfair characterization? I mean, in On Borrowed Time, or OBT as I call it.
OBT, yeah. The hit movie.
In the hit movie OBT, which is available on YouTube.
Yeah, you should go watch it.
You have to get into these characters that are completely inconsistent with your own who you are, right? So I think what the saying is that, okay, when we're engaging in this process of acting, right? If I'm acting, I'm dead. I mean, it's a giveaway, because acting is not acting, or acting is not good acting. Good acting is just doing.
Right. So good acting is still acting.
Yeah.
So Christopher Lee, an amazing actor, fantastic actor. You should watch his movies if you haven't. If you haven't, I don't know where you've been.
I don't watch the movies that are rated R.
Well, he's in Lord of the Rings.
He's in Star Wars.
Is that PG-13? Okay. Star Wars?
He's Count Dooku, actually.
Oh, okay.
Very wasted,
All right.
honestly.
Okay.
But as he once said,
Yeah.
method acting isn't acting, and as such shouldn't be done for films.
Really?
Yeah. And
that is interesting because this is what I'm saying is a kind of a method acting statement.
It's a very method acting
Stanislavski
statement.
method. Mm-hmm.
Also, Shakespearean style acting also disagree, which is more my background.
Method acting isn't acting.
It's not acting.
What is it?
That's a great question.
Is it doing?
I guess it's doing. I think I look at acting more as constructing a mask that fits perfectly on your face. I just obviously am not perfect at doing that, or I would be a better actor. You can do things as that person, but you don't cease to be you. You just momentarily step out, if that makes sense. So it's more.
Is it
it's
a
a
process
temporary
of
thing.
forgetting?
No. If you forget, then you're not a good actor.
John, do you want to weigh in
Well,
on this one?
I just called Heath Ledger a bad actor. You knew that was an accident. But it made him suicidal. So,
I mean, I would agree with the mask part.
Right.
I think that really summarizes it. It's not becoming this character. You are just pretending to be this character.
So
But in a
acting
convincing
is
way.
pretending.
it is creating a fiction that is believable.
So in your mind, you're thinking, okay, I'm pretending to have this phone call, or I'm pretending to eat this bowl of chili, or something like that. Isn't it easier just to have the phone call or to eat the bowl of chili?
Well, no, you still do all that. It's more who you're doing it as, and momentarily you're not doing it as yourself.
You suspend disbelief in your, in who you are.
Yeah, I think when I'm acting well, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Yeah, it might sound crazy, but I think it's better for your mental well-being. That's a lovely noise. I don't know what it is though.
Sounds like the ice cream.
Exactly.
Paul, I wonder whose phone that could be.
Yeah.
It's not mine. Mine's silence.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Why would you say it's my fault?
That's the same alarm that I've heard like 5 times each morning.
That's the timer one.
I see.
I like
Okay.
lying awake and just pondering.
All right. John,
Yes.
what comes first, faith or regeneration?
Okay. Yeah, John. This determines whether or not we can be friends.
Can you go into a little bit more what you mean by like regeneration? Like
A regenerative.
Safe answer.
A person who's saved.
I mean,
Are you a
In
Baptist?
other words,
This is what this is deciding.
Can a person have faith without first being regenerated? Is it possible? In light of what's said in Genesis.
are you talking
5,
about
6.
more like along the lines of like salvation or
The imagination of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. No, I'm talking about. I'm actually what I'm getting right down to is the question of basically it's Reformed Calvinism. Does it require an act of God for a sinner to actually want to come to God?
I mean, I think it states in the Bible that anyone can come to God. Obviously, God can, like, when you're witnessing to somebody, I can pray and ask God to open up the door, give me more opportunities.
Right.
But any sinner who seeks out God will find him of his own accord.
Okay. Paul?
I mean, that's true, but he first has to be called.
Okay. Called or dragged?
That's a good question. I
Is
think
it
called.
is it an effectual call?
I think, there's the effectual and the ineffectual call, yeah.
Okay.
If they're effectually called.
Are only those who are effectually called saved?
Yeah. I
Okay.
think so.
So in other words, double predestination is your theology.
I think I might have accidentally put myself there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, technically speaking, if it's a call that isn't an effectual call, then it didn't work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you'd have to say, yeah, they're not saved.
If it's a call, if it's a call of God,
Right.
that it was a sincere call and it didn't work, that would be a proof of, or it'd be a disproof of, omnipotence.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's a question.
No, I think that's true. I don't think God can call someone and it not work, which means, again, I think you have to be called by God.
But the question is, are only those who are called by God?
Yeah, I don't see how you are saved unless God calls you to his fold. Right.
Okay. Any last word on that, John?
I mean,
Out of myself as
I'll
a
give you the last
Calvinist.
word.
Whoopsies.
I mean, I would say it says, like, in the Bible that God wants everyone to be saved.
Right.
It calls everyone, but some reject his call.
Okay.
So it more comes down to the person. Are you going to reject or accept his call to salvation?
So it's a response to faith, or a response to the call that is faith.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I would agree with that in different terms, technically. like you can see a rejection of a call on this side of heaven, and I think that's genuine, and you can see an acceptance of the call this side of heaven. But I think eternally, if God reaches out, he is divine. But
if he reaches out and you don't want to go, are you able to resist?
I think in the proximate sense, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh. But I think God knows who he's saved from the beginning of time. So.
Okay. Yeah, they did say something about that in the first chapter of Ephesians.
Well, maybe,
Okay. Let's move off of that topic for hot button topic to tough topic. 1 John 4:8 says that he that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. So what definition of love is John using in that passage?
I think it's dying unto oneself, right?
That's,
I think that's the emphasis of biblical love. Even if you say, oh, there's multiple kinds of love, which there are, all of them inevitably are dying unto oneself, and they're sacrificial.
So he that dies unto him, he that does not die unto himself does not know God, for God died unto himself.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's
and I think St. Paul also says that. In one of the Gospels, he says something, or epistles. He says something to that effect as well.
What were you going to say?
I mean, it's the attitude of not I but Christ.
Yeah.
It's not my own work, but you're going to die to self, like Paul said. I would agree with that. And it's all God. It's not you.
So Christ will replace you.
No, you still exist.
Okay.
But he will complete you. That's very cliche.
You're died. What do you mean by die to yourself?
Right, you don't live for yourself. You live for a higher purpose, Christ, and you live for the various different expressions of love. Which generosity is not focusing upon yourself; it's focusing upon benefiting others.
So it's sort of like Christ-likeness in terms.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so he that is not, striving for Christ-likeness does not know God.
Yeah, I think as far as we know, which I think is an important distinction.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
right.
There's not a definition section in this,
right?
But it's an interesting use of the word, I think, right?
Yeah, and I think if you look throughout much of the New Testament, you see a lot of that idea of if you're not striving towards Christ, you're really not living the life of a Christian. That doesn't necessarily mean you're not saved, but it doesn't mean that you are maybe not doing all that you can.
Yeah. It's trying to walk in the Spirit instead of in the flesh.
And you have to do both, right?
But walking in the Spirit, is that a work?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, fundamentally,
Uh-huh.
if you're, well, I have to say, fundamentally, you're saved if you're saved, right? If
Right.
you're a regenerated Christian.
Right.
But is it St. Peter or St. John that says, saving faith will lead to holy works, right?
James.
I couldn't remember which one.
Yeah, it's
but yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's some Christians that, like, even though they did go through the process of salvation, they are saved, they are going to heaven. That doesn't mean that, they're living like Christians.
Right.
Walking in the Spirit is getting to know God on a personal level. You talk to him like he's a person, not just some deity waiting there with a baseball bat ready to hit you whenever you mess up.
Right.
Right, yeah. He's there to help you. He's not there to hurt you.
Exactly. It's getting in the Word, talking to him like he's a person, and not just trying to either, living in the flesh or just trying to follow a list of rules and like do's and don'ts. While rules can be good,
Yeah.
That's not what makes you a Christian and one that walks with Christ.
A rule follower. And I think in some ways Christians, especially today, as we see our numbers declining, Christians are more of the mavericks than the non-Christians, right?
I would say those walking in the Spirit, leading truly Christian lives, yeah, they are. I mean, not to come back to it, but like Doug Wilson is seen as a massive pariah currently, even by non-denominational Christians and Baptists and other Presbyterians, just because he says the same things that Presbyterians have said since the Reformation, and they don't like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, that's just it.
Which I disagree with him on.
There's lots of things that have been one way for eons, and then now all of a sudden they've changed, and then anybody who makes reference to the old ways are thought of as being insane or evil or whatever the case may be, right?
Well, and the American church, largely departed from, I guess if you want to say, the old ways, or as I would say, the universal church by and large, the Catholic Church, not Roman Catholic,
right?
But,
I understood.
Yeah. Some people don't understand. They're like, "Oh, you're a Roman Catholic." It's like, no. And so it's very easy to look at someone like Doug Wilson, or other covenantal Presbyterians, and kind of think that they're saying something new, when it's really just because we have a cultural ignorance of how things historically were understood.
Yeah. Okay. All right. What are some of the biggest challenges that are facing young Christians these days?
I'm gonna let Paul take this one first. I got a bunch of thoughts. I got to put them together first.
All right.
I think fear, funnily enough, because we were talking about this right before we started recording. I think young people are very afraid of being distinctly Christian. We kind of have this desire to fit in to a degree, and so we don't largely, as bluntly, state what we believe. I know I was that way for a while, and I think that's really bad for us. And then there's also, I don't know how specific we want to get here, but there's a lot of temptations online, I think, and as life is more and more online, it's more accessible, right? So I think, lust and fear, and I think those oftentimes go hand in hand, because especially young men are largely too afraid to approach women. I know. No, I'm guilty of that myself. I'm of course not. Right. And I
if it has a pulse, you're no.
No. Unfortunately, no. I'm kidding. But I think those are the two biggest issues that young people, and especially I think young men, face. We're in a very post-feminist. Still feminist society, and most people have bought into it on some level or another.
You think that Christianity is incompatible with feminism?
I do. I think that's pretty easy to observe.
Okay.
I would say more specifically, going off of the fear thing that you say, a lot of people, young people, and I've had to struggle with myself, are afraid of being bold in their faith. Even like a while back, I was like in a store and I was wearing like my my church T-shirt, and I just had like this urge, I just want to zip up my jacket so no one sees it. And I was like, okay, no, I I should still be bold in my faith.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to fall, like Paul said, a lot of young people want acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of young people feel they don't want to be, rejected by society.
Yeah.
And they feel that their faith can, that will cause them to be rejected. And so a lot of young people are just scared of being, bold in the faith, giving the gospel.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Because we do live in a society that by and large is, scoffs at and mocks Christian faith. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and we kind of, in polite society, a lot of the time, what's the one of the big rules? No religion or politics.
Right.
Well, what else is more important to our daily communal life than those two things?
Mm-hmm.
Not much.
Yeah, conversation can be pretty vapid without getting into one of those topics.
Yeah, it's like it's why small talk is such a. I hate small talk. Makes me so annoyed. It's just like, why are we just pointlessly throwing things out? Yeah. Why don't we actually talk about something that's important or matters?
Yeah. I think too. I don't think it's a secret that religion is getting pushed out of more and more things, such as schools, things like that, and a lot of Christians are just afraid to stand up for their faith, and they just kind of go along with it.
Right.
Or they surrender those institutions, which is a big thing. Like talking
like
about the law
earlier.
Yeah.
So what's the remedy for these things?
I think for people that are called to those to fields like politics, law, which I think are very closely intertwined, just making sure that they have a good foundation in Christian classical education.
Yeah.
Whether it's through a school like NSA or another faithful school, making sure they have that. That doesn't mean every Christian has to go to college, right? I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But for those that are called to those higher offices or feel that they or believe that they have the capacity to pursue that, they need to have a good foundation in Western society.
And do you think that'll give them confidence?
Oh yeah, I have way more. I would not be willing to say most of this on camera 2-3 years ago. I might be willing to say it in private, but I would not say it in front of a camera, regardless of the size of the audience.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have had the confidence to say what I believe, even if I'm wrong. Right. I do think it's important to have that basis so that you can have a confidence in what you're saying, firm foundation and whatnot. That might be biblical.
I think one thing that I would say this country really needs, and we see religion getting pushed out of things. We need another big revival. Like, it's been a while since we've had like a big revival, and I think a lot of I've been to, we were talking about earlier, I've been to a lot of different churches, and a lot of churches I feel like they just kind of they just go back onto the woe is me mindset. It's happening,
right.
But we're gonna still persevere on as Christians. But we should be constantly praying for revival. I mean, God says, if we will ask, then He will give, and I'm sure that God would love to give us a great revival. And I think a lot of churches need to focus on that more and really, really pray for that. Recently, this last semester, we had a bunch of students start meeting together and praying, and it really took off. And I think it changed a lot of people on campus, and it really brought them into that spirit-filled walk. And I think we need to see that, but just on a much larger scale. And I think a lot of churches need to really focus on praying for revival and really following the route that God wants us to take. Yeah.
So you pointed out that a bunch of students started getting together. So would you say that's just a matter of praying, or is it also a matter of acting? Right. So
it's both.
And would it be helpful for institutions to be actively involved in that?
Yeah.
Right. Which means we need to take control of institutions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting near the end here. So my last questions would be for each of you. If you could give Caleb one piece of advice, what would you give him?
Who? Go to NSA.
Go to NSA. Okay. Is that it?
Well, you said I only could give one piece of advice.
Well,
that was my one piece of advice. Or similar. seek, go to NSA. That's my piece of advice.
Okay. John?
Go to PCC.
Go to PC. So they want you in school, Caleb. That's what they're saying. So, all right. John Van Gelderen Jr. and Paul Murrell, which I will continually
You are one of
mispronounce.
4 people that have said that right.
Thank you for coming on Northwestern Voices. You're well qualified to be on the show. We already went through that. Northwestern Florida, Northwestern United States. And if you're so inclined and you're listening to this, I implore you, please like and subscribe. For every subscription that we get, we are very thankful. And so if you like this kind of content, please do that. Thank you very much. And thank you guys for coming on to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.